My name is Yaniv. I'm here to study successful innovation professionals and uncover the mindset and models they use to de-risk the future. On this podcast, I invite fellow professors, practitioners, and entrepreneurs to have an honest conversation about the business of innovation. No more bullshit. We talk openly and honestly about what works and what doesn't. So come on, get your ass in that seat. School's about to start. Hey Jesse, how you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks, Yaniv. Glad to be on the show.
So I thought we'd do something a little different today to our listeners. Tell them a little bit about you. Who are you, Jesse?
Sure. So I'm the co-founder and chairman for Viima, and Viima is basically the most widely used and highest rated innovation management software in the world. So that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years. Before that, I've worked as a software engineer, a technical project manager. I've done a bit of consulting, enterprise sales, online and content marketing for rapidly growing software companies, and have quite a kind of like wide experience of different things before focusing full time on our work with Viima.
That's great. And what is Viima for those listeners who don't know?
Yeah, so we basically provide companies with a platform that they can use to collect ideas from their stakeholders and then manage those ideas effectively in order to basically make more innovation happen. Mm-hmm. So our software basically takes care of most of the like heavy lifting and serves as a platform for like building your process on top of. And I think what makes it so good is that it's uniquely flexible and very engaging to use, while still obviously being robust enough for the needs of like even the biggest organizations in the world.
Okay, and you're based in Finland?
Yes, that's correct. We're based in Finland, but we've basically aimed to be a global company from the very beginning. So we now have more than 8,000 organizations using the software from all over the world.
Wow. Have you seen an uptick since COVID-19?
Yeah, actually, funnily enough, March was the biggest month ever for us in terms of like both website visitors and software signups as well. We actually decided to make our basic plan free for an unlimited number of users to help organizations like survive the current crisis and hopefully come out of it stronger than before.
Right. Did you see that? I guess it's a meme. I don't know what to call it, but it's kind of been running around social media where there's a multiple choice question. And the question is, who was responsible for your digital transformation? And you've got A, the CEO, B, the CTO, and C, COVID-19.
Yeah, I actually shared that on our team's chat as well. So
I just think it's so funny, and I've been sending that to everyone.
Yeah,
it's funny, and at the same time, it's not. It's a little frustrating, I think, for us in the innovation space. And I think, as my co-host, so what we're talking about today, or what we want to talk about today, is obviously innovation, but the fact that it is a risky business, but so are the alternatives, right? And I think there isn't a better indicator of that than what's happening right now with COVID-19. What do you think?
Yeah, spot on. I think like that's exactly right. Like so many companies are obviously like, because their businesses are built on like the physical presence and are like not built to handle these kind of unexpected events. Like they really have a hard time at the moment. And then there are companies like Zoom that we're currently using to record this episode that are doing extremely well. So yes. It's unfortunate, but I think it's going to be one of those things where the divide between those that are like used to the digital world and used to innovation are going to thrive, and those who aren't are at a very large risk of being left behind.
Yeah. It seems like it's that sort of tension between, the pain pleasure principle. You're in life sort of always either running from pain or chasing pleasure. And so I feel like if businesses don't feel the pain, like they're feeling it right now, there's no reason, there's no, impetus for or a really need for change. Is that something that you've like experienced, I guess, in your work with Viima, like talking to other companies and organizations?
I think so. I think it's quite common that the vast majority of our customers use the tool mostly for the kind of incremental improvement and incremental innovation.
Yes.
Obviously, that's what like they should be spending the majority of their time and resources to do anyway. But still, it's rarer than it should be that they would actually be using innovation to try to really build new businesses and come up with breakthrough innovations and stuff like that. That's actually exceedingly rare.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to give a little bit of context to how you got on this episode, and the story was I was doing some research around innovation management tools, and I came across Viima and was very impressed. And I reached out to you because I noticed that you guys were doing something a little different than all the others, which was kind of polling your audience at different times about certain things that were going on, like little questions of like, why are you not doing this? Or why are you doing that? That sort of, you were sort of having this conversation through the interface, which I thought was super interesting. And I reached out to you and asked you about that. And you said, yeah, it's a feature we just implemented and we're still collecting the data. And I was wondering if you can kind of share some of your, I guess, preliminary insight from that feature, from that process. Like, what was the conversation with the audience in the background? What's on their mind as they're using the tool?
Sure. So obviously, even though the question asks for what's basically preventing them from making more innovation happen, because they're using the tool, obviously some of the discussion will be focused on um, incremental improvements related to specific features of the tool. But I think the more interesting thing to discuss here is the kind of things that are actually organizational challenges or the higher level challenges. And I think the couple that we've seen be repeated a number of times is basically the management's reluctance to try new things, and the decision making processes related to that. And then the other quite common one is basically the culture and the culture not being supportive of innovation.
Right. Why? Yeah. So right. So top management executives, like CEO, C-suite level type of decision making.
Not necessarily. I think that's also part of the problem, is that they might not be involved in the innovation work in many organizations at all, which obviously isn't exactly helping the situation. Yeah. But it's more that the way we see it is that many companies have very strict decision-making processes on how they do anything that requires any kind of investment. And those same processes that work when you're planning to build a new factory, it isn't obviously the same kind of process that would be ideal for any kinds of innovations, especially either the disruptive or breakthrough kind, or even the incremental kind. It's just a completely different kind of decision-making process that you need for these kind of situations.
Yeah. Is it true that, like, my experience has been that they don't even budget for innovation? I mean, it's always this sort of thing that you've got to kind of, take a little bit from here, take a little bit from there, or, kind of raise funds here or there. There isn't a structured process for budgeting innovation, let's say like on a P&L, right? As there is for other business units or business activities. Has that been your experience as well?
I think that's often the case that like it's the business units that have P&L responsibility that are like running the more incremental kind of innovation and are using their own budgets to do that. And that obviously means that there are often like tough decisions that need to be made on what to invest and what not to invest. And there might not be enough budget and of course enough like time and expertise in the staff to really work on innovation. Yeah. But I think it's also quite common these days that there's a small centralized innovation team. Often it's just a few people that are then like probably often have their own budget, but it's not really enough to really implement any kind of innovation themselves. It's enough to basically run their own operations, perhaps use a tool like ours, perhaps facilitate some kind of things within the organization or like train their other employees on, but not really for actually like implementing any of the innovations that they would be striving to come up with.
Right. So your tool, Viima, let's try to, maybe map out a bit I'd say the innovation life cycle, okay, or a funnel, for lack of a better word. Your tool is positioned sort of at the front, at the beginning of that funnel where you're generating ideas. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So we really started off with just a platform for collecting ideas, and we've then evolved from there, like basically together with our customers to kind of like support the like whole innovation process. But like we're still very, very focused on the front end of it, and like especially well, in the case of like more incremental innovations, our software might also be the platform for like tracking the implementation and like for that kind of stuff as well. But when you have larger innovations, you obviously like build teams and projects out of those. And those teams and projects or the organization usually has some kind of a project management tool already in use. So if our software was to try to kind of like do the same job, then we would be running into a lot of challenges in like being overlapping with the existing tools that the organization uses.
Right.
So what we've wanted to the role of the software to be basically is to serve as the platform where the ideas are, where you have visibility onto what's going on with them, and where you manage the decision-making process related to those ideas. But then the actual work of implementing a new business or a new product is then like managed in the project or product management tools that the organization is already using, if it's like a major project like that.
Yeah, that's key, right? I mean, you don't want to overload the potential user with yet another, enterprise, whatever software tool, right?
Exactly. And like when you want to build that culture of innovation that supports innovation and sees it as important, you have to engage people from like all over the organization and really have to get them on board. So it's key that the people have a software and a user interface that doesn't try to do everything, but is just like there for trying to inspire and like provide them with information on what things are going on within the organization.
Right. So, okay, going back to that funnel of innovation, your stakeholder, your champion within the organization is who? The innovation manager?
It can be the innovation manager, but like I would say that it's perhaps 50% of the time it's an innovation manager, and the rest of the time, maybe even a bit more than that, it's often someone within those business units who has that either P&L responsibility directly or a person that they've assigned to be responsible for their development process. So many of these organizations might not even use the term innovation internally. So it's basically improvement or development that they refer to in many cases.
That's interesting. Okay, well, I want to explore that a little bit, but let's put that aside for a second, because I want to. Okay, that's super interesting. So, do you think that person? I want to kind of put myself in the shoes of that person who doesn't know Viima and wants to get into it, and I want to kind of dive into what's the rationale behind it. Do you think that their first interest in Viima is because they are feeling sort of overwhelmed with what's happening and kind of want to, I guess, recruit their team or a bigger team to kind of help them with, idea storming or brainstorming or essentially a crowdsource innovation? Do you think that's maybe one of the first interests?
I think there's if we go back to those two different groups of champions that we have. So with the innovation managers, I would say that the stereotypical case is that they're part of that small innovation team. Maybe there's a few people there. Then someone from the management group has probably given them an assignment of basically just saying that, why don't you go and make more innovation happen for our organization, and then that might basically be everything that they've been told. They've then been given a small budget, and then they kind of have to figure out how to actually make that happen. And because they really don't have the resources or the team or the people to actually implement that innovation themselves, they have to get the organization on board, and they have to build the capabilities within each of the existing business units to really succeed in that. And they have to build that culture of innovation. And basically, the only way you can actually make that change happen and change the culture is through the ways of working that the organization uses. So you have to obviously build the vision and communicate that vision, but then you have to make sure that there are actually some kind of processes in place that really help you guide the day-to-day work. So if you just talk about the importance of innovation, then maybe people will get excited, but then next week they've all forgotten that, especially in times like this.
Yes.
So if it's not really a part of the day-to-day work of people, nothing's going to change. So I think that's the stereotypical case for those innovation managers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so is using Viima to keep the team engaged, keep people engaged?
Yeah, keep people engaged, and then obviously when people are working in their own parts of the organization, then have some kind of visibility into what's going on in other parts of the organization, engage people in the conversation. If you come up with an idea and then someone knows that, hey, this guy has already been working on this idea before, you can just use the platform to kind of get everybody to join in on the conversation when it's the right
what
time
about
to engage them.
Yeah. What about the other stakeholder, not the innovation manager?
Yeah, so if that's basically I would say that often their title is development manager or something to that extent. So for them, it's usually that now they hear these improvement suggestions in the water cooler talks or these days mostly via email or their Slack or Zoom chats or Microsoft Teams chats, and it's just they get these ideas from all over the place. They might keep them in an Excel file or something, but it's really hard for them to kind of try to even keep track of that, let alone ask people to share those systematically. And then they have to do the work of evaluating those ideas in order to present the most promising ones to the people who are making the decisions on what improvements to implement and which ones to not. So like there's a lot of like manual work and hassle involved, and they basically want a tool that makes their life much easier. So you can use the same platform for collecting them. You just set up an evaluation criteria and ask people to rate those ideas, or in some case they want to be rating them themselves, or depending on the situation. It just makes the whole process so much more easy for them to manage, but also transparent to all of the other stakeholders, so that the person doesn't become basically like an obstacle, and where all the information like stops.
Right. It becomes a bottleneck for the process.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's also a great way to get everyone, again, engaged and feeling like it's a way to include them in the conversation, which is always important, because I guess my experience has been that in a lot of organizations, if and when they decide to put someone in charge of innovation, that usually is great, but it also makes it becomes siloed. It's like it's that person or unit's responsibility to do innovation or to make innovation, right? Whatever that means. And then everyone kind of, uses that as an excuse. Well, I don't have to do innovation. I don't, it's that person's job. So I think creating a platform, it makes a lot more sense, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like that's also, I think, like one of the key mistakes is that when organizations name that specific team or person who's responsible for innovation, they kind of like expect there to just be one innovation process and then that one team to take care of all of that innovation work, when in reality it doesn't work like that, because there's so many different kinds of innovations and for different parts of the organization, that there's no way that one team could like implement all of those, let alone even know what those challenges might be, even like if they do like tons and tons of work of interviewing people across the organization about the challenges and opportunities they see. There's no way that they can still map out all of those.
Right, exactly. So how can we help our listeners who are who are thinking about innovation, maybe have tried doing that, perhaps have had some success, or perhaps have had some failures? How can we help folks de-risk innovation? Because when you think about innovation, I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that a lot of organizations don't call it innovation, which I think that might be perhaps a beginning of an answer to this question. Like, how can we help organizations de-risk innovation?
Yeah, I think like that's exactly part of the answer is the terminology and a common understanding of what innovation is. And like there's obviously so much hype regarding the term, and like if you mention it, like the term gets a bad rep in a lot of organizations. So They think that like they should become the next whatever innovative company you want to name.
The Uber,
yeah, the Uber of their industry or whatever. So like they think that they should just like completely like root out everything that they've built for years and just like do completely the opposite of what they've been doing so far. And of course there are situations where that might be the route to go, but that's really the exception. And in most cases, like the vast majority of organizations would really benefit most from focusing, especially in the beginning of their like innovation journey, to focus on the incremental side of innovation. So that's why the terminology might not be the best thing to do in the beginning. So if you just start talking about innovation, you might have a lot of skeptics, especially in the top management, if they've seen innovation projects go down in flames before. So in those cases, you just focus on incremental improvement, development, whatever you want to call it, and just focus on like improving the core of your business and do that as well and as well as possible, basically. And you want to make sure that you are able to implement new ideas quickly. You're able to like test out new things in a rapid way, and able to create a culture where everybody feels that they're part of like making the organization better every day that they're there. They're just not just doing their job, but thinking about ways that they could do things better. And once you have that kind of a culture, then like adding the term innovation and maybe thinking about the longer term future of the organization is a much easier thing to do than it would be if you just like start from like that let's be Uber of whatever industry.
Yes, yeah, I think that's so true. Yeah, get rid of all the bullshit and start by really figuring out what that term means to your organization and what are you trying to accomplish. What does success look like, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So so if I think about a checklist, right, for de-risking innovation, I would say, stop whatever you're doing right now and kind of first try to reevaluate, I guess, what works and what doesn't. I'd say, examine the language that you're using, the terminology that you're using. Is everyone on the same page? Do people understand what it is that you're talking about? Because many times, I used to be an architect like many years ago, and the example I got in architecture school was, okay, if I tell you to think about a chair, okay, and I think about a chair, I'm pretty certain that we are both thinking about different chairs, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to visualize that. We need to say what that chair looks like exactly, and that takes a little bit of effort. Also, in the communication, but maybe beyond that, like try to do something together, like co-create something, and then you get a shared understanding of what that thing is. I think a lot of organizations don't get to that point. Like they use this term innovation interchangeably to mean whatever, right? It can mean whatever. And then when I say innovation and you say innovation, we might be talking about completely different things.
Yeah. And then when you just say that, like, often the top management guidance is quite vague in that sense. So then like the people who are actually supposed to make that happen are in a really, really difficult position unless they are able to like really get that shared understanding of what the term means across the entire organization.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I think, okay, so once you've done that, you've kind of established your visions and your goals and your shared understanding of what that innovation, what that thing means to you. I would say put a plan together. What do you think? Like you could call it a strategy, but I think that's even bigger than what most companies need. I think just having a simple plan that you and other people can actually follow is more important, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like another like really common challenge is that like perhaps someone in the organization, maybe it's one of the top managers, that has a vision of what the future could look like, and then like there's just nothing in between, and then you start like some kind of an in our case like an idea challenge or idea management process, and then like and you organize a hackathon, but there's like no like real like program in place that like goes from that vision to the choices that you choose to pursue in order to have the best chance of making that vision happen, and then like making those choices into a very tangible and very practical, actionable plan of like we're going to do these X things this year and then these things the following year, and that
Yes.
kind of an approach.
Yeah, exactly. And I would even say in many of those cases, start with the end in mind. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been to so many of these hackathons where if you do more than one, one is fun, one is great, people feel energized. But then if you do more than one and nothing happens with the first one, people get sort of annoyed, and then you lose that momentum, you lose the efficacy of that tool, of that method. So I think starting with the end in mind, like you said, have that plan. Think about what you want to accomplish and what the success look like at the end of that hackathon, and then run the hackathon.
Mm-hmm.
Running the hackathon is easy. Well, it's not easy, but
but in the grand scheme of things, it is.
yes, exactly. Right. So okay. So you've got that shared understanding. You've got the strategy or that simple plan. I would say, and that's why I like Viima, is get stakeholders, like figure out who your stakeholders are and get them involved. Like, right, create an ecosystem around yourself. Like, figure out, who are the other people that you need to get involved, and start having those conversations. Like, what do you think? Have you seen that happening?
Yeah, I think like the organizations that have had the most success with Viima, most of those like have built processes where there might be someone who's basically like who's the owner for the software, and like serves as a facilitator for the whole process and teaches others. But that then like well, in Viima we have these things called boards that are basically the representation of one ideation process or innovation process.
Right.
And in those organizations, like each of those boards has their own like managers who are responsible for that specific process, and those might represent individual teams within organizations. It might be that the customer service team has their own, or it might be that a business unit has their own. Maybe it's the marketing team. There are obviously you can innovate on so many different levels and so many different things that whatever is the most applicable for your case might be different, but the shared thing is that you have owners who are responsible for making innovation happen all across the organization. So you have to get those people on board and have to get them to like carry the responsibility of making those improvements and changes, developments, innovations, whatever you want to call them, happen.
I like that word, ownership. Yes, I agree 100%. You need to find those champions, those stakeholders within the organizations who are going to own innovation or own that process, own that change, because you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. And if they don't own it, it's not going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. I guess you also have to sell them on the idea of why they should want to own it, right?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, those people are always going to be busy. So they have plenty of other things to take care of. So
yes,
you have to sell them on the idea, and of course, like, well, kind of like going back to why our tool really helps in that is that like you can use your time so much more efficiently if you have something that takes care of like a lot of the manual work instead of like that person having to run through different email discussions and Excel spreadsheets and you name it.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think so? Here's an interesting question, and again going back to the removing obstacles to innovation. Do they or should they think about a budget beforehand? Because the reason I'm asking that, because talking about money or asking for a budget, it always introduces friction into the process, and I'm kind of wondering, should they just kind of go with it? Like, if they're using Viima and they want to start a process, should they just pilot that thing, start with it, or say no, let's think about what the budget should be, because we're thinking long term, and if we do this and it's successful, we want to make sure that we can sustain it. What do you think?
I think that depends quite a lot on the kind of business you're in and the kind of ideas and innovations that you're looking to come up with. Like, for example, in our business, like it's very immaterial. Like the marketing we do is mostly content marketing online. Like the sales we do is basically like sales calls via Zoom and Teams and so forth. Our product development doesn't really need a budget. We use mostly open source software, and like we can do basically any kind of improvements and innovations with just like the time of employees. So in that case, if the ideas are something that we consider to be important, it's really easy for us to just prioritize that ahead of something that we were initially thinking of doing, and we don't really need to have a specific budget for that. But then if those ideas and improvements were like related to like the production line of your factory, then obviously you're going to need to have a budget for implementing those like ideas, and it doesn't really make sense to start like collecting those ideas before that. Unless you have to convince your boss that like we have many good ideas, we just need the budget for making them happen. In which case it might make sense, but in general, like we recommend that if you don't need a budget, just go ahead and start implementing it and start making positive change happen. But then again, like if the ideas are something that you can't implement without a budget, then try to get that.
Another quick question for you, which has been bothering me for a while, is, okay, we've collected a bunch of ideas. With Viima, we can prioritize them. Should we go for low-hanging fruit or big impacts?
Well, that again depends on the situation, as with so many other things related to innovation. Like, well, one thing that we, for example, like advocated our customers to do in like these kinds of times where like many organizations need to do tough cuts and really like save on costs wherever they can, is that they start with those like low-hanging fruits if there are things that they can implement. But of course, like if they really need to like like if it doesn't not really depend like specific innovation, but if they really need to like lay off tons of people to make the business stay alive for whatever extended period of time, that they have to do that. And the same goes for improvements to the other direction. So like if you have plenty of like low-hanging fruits that you can implement easily that have a really like great positive impact, then sure, go ahead and implement those. But then you don't want to do just like those low-hanging fruits. But you also don't want to just aim for that like one huge innovation that would change everything if it succeeds, because what if it doesn't succead, and the odds are that it won't. So you obviously have to have like a balanced portfolio of initiatives that you're aiming for. So a healthy combination of both of those, and like the classic 3 horizons model is, I think, like a good way to do that. So you have the majority of your stuff is kind of like that incremental improvement. Then you have a bunch of things that are like somewhere in between, and then a number of those big initiatives that really make a difference in the long term.
I agree. I think portfolio approach is the right way to go. And really, again, it's that sort of we touched a little bit about this, that sort of self-awareness. It goes back to that discussion of like, how do you define innovation for your organization? So that self-awareness, I think, is really key here, because you are honest about your infrastructure, right? And you're also aware and honest about your psychology. Like in many cases, how much risk are you willing to take? It's like putting together your own personal investment portfolio. Like how much risk are you willing to tolerate? Are you more risk averse or more adventurous? So I think it really, and I would invite more companies to take this opportunity if we can call it this, the COVID-19, to really reflect, right, on what they've been doing so far and be brutally honest about, what they come up with. Like, what's the insight from that period of reflection? And then kind of chart a new course for what comes next.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think there's an old saying that you should never let a good crisis go to waste, and I think that's
yes.
true here as well. So we can use the crisis and the unfortunate situation to take the positive out of it and use the urgency that the crisis creates to hopefully move things along faster than they otherwise would have. Like going back to the meme that you talked about earlier.
Yes. Yeah, I think COVID-19 is the new Kodak case study.
Yeah.
For me, people are not going to remember Kodak. I mean, the Kodak, case study where how did they not, right? How did they not commercialize that digital camera? They were first, right? They lost the market. They went bankrupt. Blah blah blah. All of that. I don't think people are going to remember that. I think they're going to remember COVID-19
yes,
as that kick in the butt that they needed.
Yeah. And another thing is that I recently saw this company called Arc Investment Management talk about how innovation really does well during times of crisis, and when during the 08-09 financial crisis, when most companies cut their technology budgets by basically 30% or so. Like companies like Salesforce that had the then disruptive software as a service business model, like even the worst quarter of revenue growth for them was 20% or more, because their business model really helped those companies still get the business done and move forward and improve the ways that they were working, while still providing the right kind of financial structure for that kind of a situation. So people are simply much more willing to try out new things when times are tough, than they otherwise would have if they just see the upside in doing that, because they have their backs against the wall, basically.
Exactly. It makes me think about, that's interesting, makes you think about those classic 80s TV series. I don't know if you're too young to remember that, but do you remember A-Team? You remember MacGyver? Do you remember those?
I've seen a few episodes of both, but those weren't really in my childhood.
Okay, so they were, I guess, older than you are, but they were a major part of my childhood. And it's interesting, they were built on, and this is fascinating for me on a personal level, but there's always a format, right, behind these TV series. And they were built on this format of the protagonist, the hero, kind of being pushed to the corner, put in an impossible situation, and then find a creative, not just creative, super creative way of getting themselves out of that situation. And that was fantastic. And I think we're at that point, right? Not to be sarcastic or anything like that. I think the companies that realize, again, reflect on the situation and realize where they are and do the best they can and think creatively, super creatively, about ways of getting out of the situation are going to be the ones that survive this.
Yeah. It's really it's a tough situation, but the ones that are able to take the situation and make the most out of it are going to come out of this stronger than before.
Yeah. So with that super optimistic note, we've been talking a lot about Viima. How can people learn more about Viima? And if you could, or if you thought about how can they use Viima in this specific situation during COVID-19 to be more successful or to help them get out of this situation more quickly?
Sure. So the best place to learn about our tool is obviously our website. So it's viima.com. So viima.com. And there you'll learn about the tool. You can sign up for it for free. As mentioned, it's now the basic plan is now free for an unlimited number of users.
Cool.
So all of your listeners can sign up for that and start using it with their organization. And if you do sign up for the tool, you'll also get a link to a recent knowledge base article that we have that really walks you step by step through on how to create your first idea challenge that is focused on saving costs, which I think is a big priority for many organizations at the moment. So that's a really convenient way to really get some positive change happen in the organization. With the tool, everyone will get familiar with the tool. And then once everybody is familiar with it and they see that it's led to something positive for the organization, it's much easier to then start using the tool for other things as well within the organization. So I think that's what I would recommend people to do. And the link to that will be in the auto responder email for people who sign up for the tool at the moment.
That's great. That's great. And I'll put all of that. I'll put the link and everything in the show notes. How can people learn more about you if they wanted to reach out to you or ask you more questions about what we discussed? What's the best way?
Sure. So my email is also on the contact page of our website, but it's jesse@viima.com. So it's quite simple to get. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or anything.
Cool. Jesse, thank you so much. You've been a great co-host.
Thanks. The pleasure was all mine, Yaniv.